I can remember in November 2019, I was chatting to a guy called Mark Wildgust, who's a pretty senior guy at Janssen, a super person. And we were talking about how one implemented some of the novel therapies in prostate cancer and what was the comparator. And I said, well, I was talking about chemotherapy. And he sort of said, Simon, no one gets chemotherapy. And I was like, no, they do, Mark, they do. We did these studies, they showed whatever. And he was like, no one gets chemotherapy. Then he showed me some market research and no one got chemotherapy. And I audited my own practice and it was very low. It was a real eureka moment for me. It was a moment where I realised that just because something's published in the New England Journal of Medicine doesn't mean it's going to make it into the clinic, even my own clinics. And then I said to people in my academic group, how many patients do you think get chemotherapy? And everyone said 70, 80%.
You know who made it.
Hello, and welcome to Pharma Sessions, a place for pharmaceutical leaders to come and learn from each other. I'm your host, Jonathan Kaskey. Technology and market trends are bringing change at an ever-accelerating rate, and no person, team, or company can afford to be left behind. Here, we dive into the strategies and tactics that our guests use to tackle these challenges and create new opportunities, and how you can do the same in your own organization. This episode of Pharma Sessions is sponsored by Xsunt, makers of the X1 reporting platform. On today's episode of Pharma Sessions, I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Simon Chowdhury, a medical oncologist and a leader in urological cancer care, clinical research, and medical education. Dr. Chowdhury has spent his career at the intersection of the frontline oncology practice, clinical trials, translating complex science into better patient care. And what makes his perspective really compelling is his focus on a challenge that is affecting nearly every part of medicine today. How do we get the right knowledge to the right clinicians and patients in a form they can actually use? So we're going to talk a bit today about a project that Simon's working on that's really, really interesting called Open Medicine, which is attempting to bridge the gap between academic expertise, real-world care, and provide trusted doctor-led education, really in a world that's absolutely flooded with misinformation, I should say. So I'm pretty excited about this. It's a topic that I have a lot of personal interest in. I think it'll be a great conversation. Simon, did I do an okay job introducing you?
You were far too kind, Jonathan, far too kind. But thank you very much. And I'm really excited to be here and really excited to chat to you about the new project and how that may well fit in and hopefully help shape medical education and improve patient care.
All right. So before we get into all of that, I always like to do a quick get to know people. And lately I've been on this kick of asking as an icebreaker, what is your go-to or go-tos for karaoke when you're forced to perform? Or maybe choose to perform.
When you come to London, I think Jonathan's actually a very talented musician. There's a guitar in the background. I'm a very enthusiastic karaoke singer, and I was once told when I was singing very much out of key that I should sing Daydream Believer by the Monkees because they were a manufactured band and it's got a very narrow vocal range. So probably that's one of my songs. And then my goddaughter Adele got me to learn the lyrics to Super Bass by Nicki Minaj, which is super difficult to learn. It took me 4 months of walking around London medical conferences doing this one for the boys and boom system, top-down AC with the cooling system, etc., etc. So those are the ones we'll do, Jonathan.
I love it. Unfortunately, I have a lot of enthusiasm for singing. I can play the guitar okay, but I know I'm not tone deaf because I can hear my own singing and I can hear what it sounds like, but that is just a skill that unfortunately passed me by. But I will say that doesn't prevent me from trying to do a Chris Cornell impersonation at any given moment in time. So, all right, let's start by looking back a bit. I know you've done a lot in oncology and research and medical education. Maybe take us through a little bit of your career, but one thing that's always interesting is the motivation, right? What first drew you to this work and what's kept you committed to it?
I think I was thinking about this and what drew me to the work was the patients. So age 5, my dad wanted me to be a doctor. He wanted me to go to Cambridge University and be a doctor at Guy's Hospital. And that's what I ended up doing. which one of us more mad? Probably me. And as a very wet behind the ears 24-year-old, I ended up on the wards at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital. And the thing that I noticed was how amazing the patients were. You just saw the best of human nature. So I would be coming in on a Monday morning, often having maybe done some karaoke at the weekend, and the patients were like, oh, it's lovely to see you, Dr. Chowdhury. How's your mum? How's your dad? How did Manchester United do? Or the Boston Celtics, maybe? And I was just amazed at you saw the best of human nature. So it really motivated me to work hard, to try and help those people. And I think probably my parents came from very, very simple backgrounds, and they worked very hard. They were very determined. They were smart people, very kind people. And I think they gave me I had opportunities that they never had. And so I wanted to do something in an area where there was clearly need. And oncology was the intersection of need and also just amazing patients. You just see the best of human nature, and you still do. And you see such fortitude. You see the best of human nature, the best of human spirit. So helping cancer patients is just a passion for me. And it's hard because a lot of cancer patients still don't do well, but they're amazing people. And I'm very, very privileged to have many of them in my life.
That's really incredible. I mean, you're talking about seeing people going through what is oftentimes probably the hardest thing that they or their families will have to personally deal with. So there must be, I guess it's a question, just a personal question for me, but you've been doing this for quite some time. How do you deal with that emotionally, right? So that you're able to provide that support and be vested. But as you say, some of these prognoses are really pretty grim.
I think I'm probably the worst person to say how to deal with it. I probably deal with it in a karaoke bar and with, I think, great friends. I've got incredible friends. And I think now I recognize it a lot more. So one of the reasons why I've stepped away to a degree from clinical medicine is got too much for me, to be honest. Got to a point where I was just too emotionally engaged. One of my bosses, who's sadly no longer with us, a guy called Martin Gore from the Royal Marsden, he said to me, you really care, don't you? And I said, doesn't everyone? He said, no, not everyone does, Simon. And he said, you, like me, will run into compassion fatigue. And I think I did. And I think now with open medicine and just doing a little bit of clinical medicine, I've got a much better balance. I think the volume of patients I was seeing before was just too much. And I look at a lot of my friends, colleagues, in all of them, and I think one of the things that we're trying to do is to make life easier for doctors and patients, just so that the increasing complexity of science, medicine, therapies, it's really hard to stay on top of that. And I think people are burnt out. So I think if we can simplify things and make life a bit easier for everyone, that's
so
great.
Before we get into open medicine and what you're working on now, when you transitioned away from clinical practice or somewhat, what are you transitioning into? What were you working on prior to this?
So I was working very much in an academic clinical centre. I was the head of the GU department there, which was great, in South London, which I love London. It's a brilliant city. It's got a great vibrancy. It's also got a huge amount of poverty, immigrant. My dad was an immigrant to this country, to the UK. So I actually really like the mix. I love the diversity of London. There's complex type of diversity for both of our countries. But for me, looking after people from India, Australia, the West Indies, Europe, as well as the indigenous South London population, there's a real authenticity there. And I was sort of saying to people, I don't particularly want to look after people who don't have real problems. Now, I now see that anyone coming to a doctor probably does have a real problem. But I think back in the 90s, I was probably a little bit dismissive of some of the more softer problems and some things around mental illness, so I'd be much more attuned to now. But I think there's an authenticity in that population, and there's an authenticity in oncology that I think is just, it really speaks to me. So in the unit there, we built it from quite a small unit up into a world-leading unit, a lot of research. And then I realised that actually to get the research out there, we needed to get the education, and that became a passion for me. Working a lot with pharma, I think there's a lot of, some people are very dismissive of pharma. I'm certainly not. It's very easy for doctors to make out that we're the angels and they're the devils, whatever, or the good guys, the bad guys and girls. It's definitely not like that. We're all on the same team. We all want the same thing. And I've been so impressed with my pharma colleagues and friends who have a real passion to improve things. So I think we wanted to work together and just do what we can to get the right therapies to the right people and make the best difference.
That's been my experience working with pharma too, particularly in medical affairs was where I've spent a good deal of time. And those people are really just get the right patient to the right drug at the right time. But even, I mean, if we're being honest about it, there's a real need for commercial to move faster, because at the end of the day, a medicine sitting in a lab doesn't help anybody, right? It needs to get into patients' bodies. And that means there's a lot of stuff that has to happen, and it needs to get regulatory approval and all of that. So I think that it needs to be give and pull. Or give and take. This is my personal
100%. And to be honest, without the commercial world, we wouldn't have the finances to develop these drugs. So I think we need to probably reassess some aspects of it. But I think far too many doctors are dismissive of that side of it. It's a commercial world. And actually, part of our role is to help get those therapies out there, because the successful therapies will pay for the trials that lead to other therapies coming through. I strongly believe that. And, as I say, I work a lot with people in pharma, and they're often the smartest and most decent people. And you have to look at the vaccine programs that happened. That wasn't that long ago. I suppose it's 5 years ago now, but the pharma companies did such a brilliant job getting the vaccines out there and doing along those lines. I love bringing patients along to meet colleagues in pharma. And the first thing the patients say is, they say, Simon says, I should be thanking you because you're the real reason I'm alive. And it's true. I'm not the person making, the clever therapies in prostate or kidney or bladder cancer. It's the guys there. It's guys and girls in the pharma industry. So, I think they need to be.
Well, that's great. And I feel like that is a whole conversation can be had about that. But I'm actually really interested in this knowledge gap, right? Because even as you are describing the patient populations that you're treating in South London, I would assume it's not just that there's an information gap. There's probably many different information gaps depending on who is in your audience and what types of content they have accessible or that they're consuming or at some point in times being served up to them by the algorithms. So when did you first start to realize there was a big gap between cutting edge knowledge and what actually reaches patients?
This episode is sponsored by Structured Meetings. It's a Teams app that turns your own Teams instance into the perfect advisory board platform. Save money, get insights faster, and keep your data secure. Check it out at www.structuredmeetings.com.
I think it was slowly coming to me because I've got a lot of friends who work in the community, and I realized that they just didn't have the privilege that I had. They were seeing far many more patients without the infrastructure, nursing, pharmacy, doctors, community with regards to that, the community, academic community there. I was very fortunate I could go to all the meetings. I was invited to do these things, and a lot of stuff was pitched towards me. If there was one moment in time, I can remember in November 2019, I was chatting to a guy called Mark Wildgust, who's a pretty senior guy at Janssen, a super person. And we were talking about how one implemented some of the novel therapies in prostate cancer and what was the comparator. And I said, well, I was talking about chemotherapy. And he sort of said, Simon, no one gets chemotherapy. And I was like, no, they do, Mark, they do. We did these studies, they showed whatever. And he was like, no one gets chemotherapy. Then he showed me some market research and no one got chemotherapy. And I audited my own practice and it was very low. It was a real eureka moment for me. It was a moment where I realized that just because something's published in the New England Journal of Medicine doesn't mean it's going to make it into the clinic, even my own clinics. And then I said to people in my academic group, well, how many patients do you think get chemotherapy? And everyone said 70, 80%. And then we did a UK audit and it was 27%. It's a bit low. But the UK is fortunate and unfortunate in our national healthcare system, which I'm very proud of, but it's very joined up. But it means the implementation of therapies is much more straightforward than, say, in the US. And I'm a big fan of the US. I trained at Dana-Farber, have lots of friends there. My cousin's still there. I'm not one of these Brits who thinks the US is awful, far from. I think our healthcare systems could work much more closely together. But I think it's harder to initiate and popularize and democratize a therapy in the US because it's a bit more broken down, I think, than the UK. But in the UK, the uptake was low. And so it made me really stop, pause, and focus some energies on how one changes that and it made me think most people are treated in the community. They're not treated in academic centres like my own or Arbor. They're treated out in the community in the UK, the US, Germany, France, etc. Most countries, if not all countries, it's like that. And I think patients want to be treated in the community. They don't want to travel 3 hours to come into hot, dirty, sticky London or traveling to Boston or New York or to Hamburg or Paris, just because those cities, they want to stay close to home. Most of our patients are older. They trust their local doctors, quite rightly, who have looked after them for a long period of time. And we need to work with those doctors to make life a bit easier.
That makes a ton of sense. I mean, that even mirrors in the U.S. my own experience of I live a couple hours south of Philadelphia. And when people have serious things going on, they go north to Philly, right? They're going to Penn, they're going to CHOP, they're going to those real centers of excellence. This need that you've identified, right, to democratize or to essentially spread evidence-based clinical care from academic settings out to the broader clinical world. Tell me a bit about open medicine and motivation and kind of what made you go from that eureka moment to where we are now.
So I've been working a little bit in medical education, some of it with pharma, some of it independently, trying to sort of read myself around about innovation, adoption, looking at things like tech, music, electronics, how they've done things where people adopt a lot quicker than medicine. Medicine's very conservative, and I think the maxim of do no harm is something that we probably hide behind a little bit. And oncologists are not the best at this. The surgeons and the hematologists are much better than the medical oncologists. So if you look at the implementation of robotic prostatectomy, that was incredible. And I think our surgical colleagues have to be thanked to a degree with that. The evidence base is low. There's no randomized trial showing that robotic surgery is better than open surgery. But I think they showed that with an energy and an education program, they were able to do that. And that's a tech which is different, giving therapies. Open medicine came about from a passion project, really, from myself and one of my fellow founders of EatGhost, who's a super, is our CEO, super intelligent guy, very, very thoughtful. We sort of the yin and the yang. I do a lot of, I speak a lot, he thinks a lot. So we're a good couple where that's concerned. But both of us are passionate about education, and we both wanted something that is going to, it's a commercial operation, but we also wanted something that's going to benefit beyond that. And we wanted a platform that is completely open, is free at point of access, doesn't have adverts, doesn't have undue bias from anyone. Pharma's the obvious people, but as I said, they're not the enemy. And we wanted to get what's in experts' minds. So let's take an expert at Memorial Sloan Kettering and take what's in that expert's mind and cascade it into a way that is easily accessible on a mobile phone. So that someone in the community or a trainee, that UX experience, they can.
If you've been enjoying the conversations here on Pharma Sessions, you should know they're made possible by the team at Exunt. Exunt helps life sciences companies turn complex data into clear, actionable insight. For years, Exunt has made complicated data sets simple to help commercial, medical, and operations teams map what's happening, predict what's next, and make stronger decisions faster. And now there's an added AI layer that makes everything work so much better. I was actually pretty jaded about some of the AI approaches I'd seen, but when Exunt showed me theirs, I actually left my job to come work for them. It's really awesome. So if you want to understand your market, your customers, or your performance with more clarity than ever, check out exunt.com. That's XSUNT.com. All right, let's jump back into the episode.
It makes a tremendous amount of sense. And I love the idea of pulling parallels from the tech world, pulling parallels from other industries, because at the end of the day, sometimes people, as they're designing these programs, forget that doctors are fundamentally people, right? And if they can see something in 15 seconds versus 15 minutes, there's a massive benefit to that. Is your take that this simplification of taking the uber expert in a field and putting their evidence-based guidelines essentially into this format is solving the access problem via faster access, more complete access? Like, what is the ultimate goal here?
I think the ultimate goal is really to share knowledge in a way that is truly democratic. I think at the moment I'm an academic or a pseudo-academic. I don't really think of myself as an academic. I like to think of myself as a pragmatic. But I work in academic centres. I have a role at the Medical Research Council in the UK. I go and chat to people at Dana-Farber. My cousin's the head of radiation biology there, very smart guy. So I mix with the great and the good. And I think the problem is that often we talk about stuff that is really fine detail, and sometimes not really amongst my friends so much, but sometimes you see people showing off academically, making it more complicated, showing that they understand the genomic side of things and not making it more accessible. So for me, I want to strip it back. I really like the concept of simple Simon, of sort of saying to someone, if you understand something really well, explain it in a really simple way. When we go to the baseball, Jonathan, I don't understand baseball so well, and you'll strip it back. You're a very good communicator. You'll make it fun and easy. That's what we want to do. We want to make it fun and easy so that people actually enjoy it. I get a lot of my education from X, which surprises people more than journals, more than academic meetings. I get it on X and I interact that way. And that's easy for me as a man. I think it's much harder for women on X and much harder for people with more diversity. So we wanted a platform where it's open for everyone, but the content is verified. And also it's a safe place where people are abused, and we're going to have very strict regulation there. Not regulation. We want debate. We want people to say, I do it this way, or this is why I do it this way. But respectful, collegiate debate, not sort of calling people names and stuff. And I've seen a lot of my female friends come off X, and I feel very sad because, A, they added a huge amount, and they're some of the smartest people I know. We want somewhere where they can go and feel safe.
It's great. And especially if you're trying to do this from a professional setting where you're hoping to further patient care, the last thing you want is heaps of abuse coming at you. So at one point in my career, I worked for this company in the US. It was called Sermo. And what we had was a network of physicians. And we had a pretty decent size chunk, at least at the time, of the US practicing physicians. And we were seeing some of this happening. And what we ultimately found was that it wasn't necessarily a censorship. Like, I can't actually even remember a time where we had to tell people to rein it in. It was more about creating an environment where there were places to talk about clinical issues. There were places to talk about the business of running a small practice, essentially a small business in the US, dealing with insurance agencies and all of the like. So I've spent some time on open medicine. What I had seen was really flow charts, right? And this graphical simplified interface. I'd encourage people that are interested to check it out as a way to see how science can be communicated. Is your vision that this becomes a community environment for having back and forth discussions around the recommended treatment protocols?
I think ultimately what we've got at the moment, and you described it really well, is what we call living algorithms. So we found from our research that actually what people wanted was these flow charts that would guide them through a clinical problem. So let's say something in my area, say advanced castrate-sensitive prostate cancer. How does say Niraj Agarwal, one of the world's leaders, address that? And Niraj is one of our thought leaders. He helped us to design an algorithm, and it's a click-through thing. What we noticed was these algorithms that were kind of like PowerPoint slides hadn't changed in the last 30 years. And I think that horrified my fellow founders who are brilliant at software, at website design, at AI, about search engine optimization. And I'm learning so much from them. The other founders are not doctors, thank goodness. So we wanted to build something that's interactive, has really great user experience, but takes the best expertise in a disease area, but puts it in a format that is user-friendly. And I think what we have at the moment is we're full of a world of PDFs. We're full of a world that's text-heavy. And I think as you will know, and as I will know from the younger people I work with, that isn't their world anymore. They've grown up on X, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. They want rolling content. They want content that is much more visual-friendly and much less...
Right, much more consumable, right? Yes.
Well, so the depth is more interactive. I think I now look at it. I read quite a lot of papers and things because I'm still interested in it. I still write them. But I sometimes, my heart sinks when someone sends me a 30-page paper. I'm like, okay, that's going to be 3-4 hours of my life I won't get back. And it's sort of, I would much rather have it in a short format. So it's sort of like, and even on X, when someone does a tweetorial that's like 20 tweets long, I don't really think I think they're missing the point. There was a brilliant one by Ashish, one of our foundation circle, is a leading bladder cancer. And he did it in 3 tweets. And I just said, oncologists, take note. Because that's what I want us to have. To come back to your question, and sorry I didn't answer about community, I think ultimately we won't be there quite yet. To start off with, we'll have content that is more sort of where the interaction is from the user with the website. But ultimately, we really want people's comments. We want people to say, I'm using Enhertu, find out how do you find the interstitial lung disease? What's the nuance? So I think when I'm taking what's in people's brains, I'm very lucky. When I did some of my training at Dana-Farber, some of the best GU people in the world were there and are still there. And I could phone up someone like Tony Chowdhury, who's the head of the unit there, and say, Tony, I'm about to use nivolumab for the first time. What should I be looking out for? And Tony said, bring back in 2 weeks' time, make sure you check their thyroid function, warn them about diarrhea, etc. And you can't necessarily get that from the paper. Reading a paper that's just got grading on there, it sort of works, doesn't work. And I think sometimes some of the grade 1, 2 toxicities are underplayed. So I think having someone who's got real wealth of experience take you through it. And ultimately, we will embed diagrams, videos, etc. within the algorithms. So I think it's the equivalent of being able to phone up the best people in the world and get them to take you through.
Yeah, and I think that is expertise and it's communication. I sometimes think of I think a famous example of this is Steve Jobs on stage introducing the iPhone, where it's like, it's your music on your phone. It's your music on your phone. He says it 3-4 times. He's like, are you getting it? It's your music on your phone, right? Like, this is one of the most successful product launches ever. And he boils it down to one sentence. So this is my segue, because he's also the person that I think of when I think of some of the potential impacts of misinformation. Because this is something that we talked about going in, was one of the goals of this is to combat misinformation. And I think it's a very interesting example, because I'm sure you know much more about this than I do, but my understanding of it is that he essentially had a treatable cancer that he was attempting to treat with organic fruit juices, basically. And by the time he was ready for real treatment, it was too late and he died. And it has nothing to do with intelligence, right? Nobody would argue he's not a smart, brilliant guy or connections or access or anything else. So tell me a bit about what you're seeing out there for misinformation and what you think that doctors' responsibilities are in this space.
I think that's a really good example. I don't know the details of his case too much, but that's my understanding of it. I think what we're seeing more and more of, and I think doctors have to look at themselves a bit here. It's very easy for us to criticize patients and say, these people, they don't get, there's a reason they're not trusting doctors so much. And there's a reason they're looking for alternative sources. And some of it, as you said, is some of the alternative sources are excellent communicators and also listeners, not my strongest point. So I think what we're hoping to do with open medicine is listen, but also provide a trusted source. So it's interesting. I like generative AI. I think ChatGPT, etc., is actually a very good resource. But it was interesting. My friend's son, there's a meningitis outbreak in the UK, or there was a couple of months ago, and lots of young kids were dying. It's very sad. And my friend, his son, who's in the sort of target age group, the kissing age group, 17-year-old boy, and he's in the area where there was the highest instance. What do you think? And I started looking on ChatGPT and I thought, I'm going to phone someone up, because I thought I'm not going to take any chances with my godson, Tom. So I think what we want to have is the best source of resource, but something. So what that showed me is that I like generative AI, but I was going to trust my friend's son on with it. So we want to have something that's trustworthy, where you can get that voice. So our content is going to be high quality, but also both in terms of the spec, but also in terms of the actual knowledge on there. So I think that's the bit where we want to have a trusted resource. At the moment, our target audience is doctors, but by the end of the year, we hope to have patient-related resources. And I think there's going to be more empowerment of patients. I've always been someone that's never minded patients coming in with information and things like that. It's very hard when you've got a cancer. It's very scary. And there's a lot of very smart patients out there. I learn from my patients every day, if not every week. It's a question of harnessing what's out there. I'm very happy when patients come and are educated and they've educated themselves. It's concerning that there are a lot of people out there trying to make money from patients, and that I think is awful. And there's a lot of poor information out there. So I hope what we will be is a filter for good information.
Right. It's almost, I think of it as here in the States, you could get your information from Instagram, you could get it from TikTok, you could get it from the Mayo Clinic. You could go and you could do a PubMed search, which is what I'm not smart enough to read the actual papers, but I'll often look for a meta-analysis, because that's kind of a nice, just give me the summary of all of the research. And I feel like creating that level of understanding, of recognizing what is a good and trusted source and what might not be. I feel like that is a real challenge and opportunity for you all. So how are you looking to build that brand of open medicine as, hey, these are not people trying to sell you a supplement or whatever alternative cure. This is truly a trusted source of information.
It's a really good point. Let me just go back to something you said there, because you said you're not smart enough. You're plenty smart enough. And I think this is the way that academics, not just medicine, academic English graduates, we pitch it so we make you feel that you're not smart enough. The smart people would explain it in a way that made it explainable to our patients and to our trainees and to our colleagues. There's Einstein who said, if you really understand something, you can explain it simply. So it's not about you not being smart enough, Jonathan. It's about us creating a structure that is exclusive, not inclusive. So we want to do something that's really inclusive. To come back to what you were saying about a trusted source, I feel really, really very fortunate being the chief medical officer. I've been able to go out and pick the team. So I've gone out, there's people that I know, I've got a big network. There's also people I've thought, that person's brilliant at explaining stuff. So I've gone to some of the usual suspects, as it were, but we're really actually trying to get people, trainees, people in the community. I think community oncologists have been really talked about badly by a lot of us in academia. And I think these are good people. They're seeing the bulk of the patients. They're doing it under often less than ideal circumstances. We need to really make an effort to make sure that the content we're providing, the way we're working, matches what they need. Not what we think they need or not what we need, but the other way around. So exactly what you're saying on PubMed, I'm not X and Y. Well, that's PubMed's fault. It's not yours. And PubMed needs to change. Well, it is changing, isn't it, with various funding things. But so I think for us, it's about providing something that Jonathan can go to in 6 months' time and say, this is actually really good. And if you've got a friend who's going through something difficult, you feel comfortable signpost them that way. So we're fortunate. We've got a foundation circle of some of the best people from around the world. Probably, I think we almost hit 50 in oncology, and now we're going to metabolic medicine. So I think it's around that. But I think we must never, in our side, make people feel that they're not smart enough or make them feel that we're not providing stuff they can engage with. In my old hospital, we used to hand out 30-page written summaries of, say, docetaxel and chemotherapy for prostate cancer. Almost half the people coming had a reading age less than 10. A lot of people couldn't read. That's not because they're stupid. It's just because they'd had less advantage than people like myself. But we carried on handing out the written information. We need to change that mentality.
I have a story along these lines that I think is kind of interesting, right? Where you had brought up the generative AI earlier. But I had previously worked at a company that was doing a lot of work around some of the documentation that goes along with getting all these drugs to market. So one of the projects we were proposing was using generative AI essentially to take a clinical trial protocol and turn it into an ICF, an informed consent form, which is a requirement to document that's meant to be at basically a fourth, fifth grade reading level. So for those in the UK, what is that, like 10, 11-year-old person? And that's meant to help people truly understand what they're signing up for if they volunteer for a clinical trial or want to participate in one. And we were running into all types of pushback with the legal review team about doing this from the pharma company. It was Big Pharma. And what ended up getting that one pushed forward was they found out that the nurses at the trial sites themselves were saying, this is ridiculous. I'm going to just take this thing and I'm going to put it into ChatGPT and I'm going to have it generate my own ICF, something my patients can actually understand. So I think that then gets into a whole nother set of some ways, like the cat's out of the bag or the horse has left the barn or whatever animal analogy you want to use, but is getting control of this, right? And focus on simplification, focus on communication is actually a huge opportunity for doctors, for pharma, for anybody who's looking to really further medical care.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The nurses get it, and the patients go to the nurses because they're better communicators than the doctors, myself included. They're less intimidating. So we need to have something that is much more like that, less intimidating for everyone. You can make things. My cousin says the head of genomics at Dana-Farber, or the head of radiation biology and genomic stability. He's a brilliant communicator because he strips it back. He takes it to a level for his audience, not for him. He can debate at a Nobel Prize level if he wants to, but actually he communicates, did a lot of work for refugee kids in Syria. Very, very proud of him. And, he was teaching 14-year-olds there refugee kids, poor kids. And that takes a real talent to engage an audience like that. That's much harder than engaging an audience at Harvard.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
absolutely. Very good story. So, all right. So let's end with a bit of a forward-looking question. So if this vision succeeds, what changes for the average patient, and what would you think the real-world impact would look like a few years from now?
I think ultimately it's all about improving patient care. So in cancer care, patients living longer and living better. So less side effects of treatment, better use of drugs, right dosing. So people get the right drug at the right time, at the right dose with the right supportive care. And it might be they don't need to have a therapy. We overtreat a lot in prostate cancer. So it might be someone with localized prostate cancer goes on to active surveillance. That would be a great win. They don't unnecessarily have a treatment, be it a drug treatment like I give that is lowers testosterone, or a surgical treatment that may cause incontinence or impotence, or radiotherapy, which can cause bowel and bladder problems and potency problems. So I think ultimately if open medicine works as we hope it will be better patient care and improved quality and quantity of life for many, many patients globally.
All right, Simon, we'll leave it there. Hopefully the next time we talk, we're at a karaoke bar in London.
Makers of the X1
we'll do a whole
reporting
Nicki
platform.
Minaj show, and it'll be great. And that's a wrap on today's episode of Pharma Sessions with me, Jonathan Kaskey. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe and share it with someone else in the pharma world who might need to hear it. For more on pharma trends, career growth, and business strategies, connect with me, Jonathan Kaskey, on LinkedIn. Until next time, thanks for listening.
This episode is sponsored by Structured Meetings. For listeners who don't know my background, I'm a huge fan of asynchronous ad boards. I used to work for the leading provider of async ad boards, and, not to brag, but my clients did more events than anyone else's. I've literally led thousands from the vendor side, so I can humbly claim some expertise. One of the questions I used to get all the time was, can we just do this in Teams? And the answer back then was, not really. Teams out of the box is clunky and not fit for purpose. Structured Meetings changed that by creating an MS Teams app that lets you have these discussions in a really smart way in your own Teams instance. It changes Teams just enough to check all the boxes for what's needed for great ad boards. And also, it's super fast and it saves people a ton of money. Visit www.structuredmeetings.com for more info. All right, back to the show.